The Young and the Restless Spoilers, The Untold Secrets, Victor's plan and Audra's game of betrayal. Victor Newman had always been the mastermind of Genoa City. His ruthless business tactics, cold demeanor, and uncanny ability to manipulate everyone around him had earned him the reputation of a force to be reckoned with. He had orchestrated countless schemes, outmaneuvered rivals, and crushed enemies, all while maintaining an iron grip on the power he had carefully cultivated over the years. But now, the great Victor Newman was facing a situation unlike any other. A plan, one that had promised to give him the upper hand, was unraveling in the most unexpected way. And this time, the chaos was not being caused by his rivals, it was coming from within. Audra's betrayal, a shift in allegiance. Audra Charles had always been a wild card, a beautiful and ambitious woman with a knack for getting what she wanted. When Victor first approached her, promising her a place by his side in a web of corporate intrigue and power plays, Audra had seen an opportunity. Victor was a man of influence, and working with him could give her the access she needed to elevate herself in ways she had never imagined. But as the weeks went by, the cracks in Victor's empire began to show, and Audra quickly realized that the price of success might be higher than she had bargained for. At first, it seemed like a dream come true. Victor's confidence in her was flattering, and the promises of wealth and influence were intoxicating. But as she witnessed the way he treated his family, his children, his ex-wives, and even his closest allies, Audra began to feel uneasy. Victor was a man driven by ambition and ego, and he cared little for the well-being of those who stood in his way. His loyalty was as fleeting as the next business deal, and his ruthlessness knew no bounds. It didn't take long for Audra to realize that working with Victor would cost her far more than she could ever gain. She would be hated by almost everyone, an outsider, a pawn in Victor's grand game. And even if she did manage to succeed, she would ultimately be discarded like so many others who had crossed paths with him. Audra's mind began to race. The stakes were too high, and the risks too dangerous. She needed to act fast, or she would be consumed by the very man who had promised her everything. In a bold move, Audra decided to change her allegiance. Instead of continuing to blindly follow Victor's orders, she made a calculated decision to reveal everything she knew to those who could stop him, Kyle Abbott and Claire Newman. Audra had always seen Kyle as a clever and resourceful ally, someone who had the intelligence and determination to take down Victor if given the right tools. Claire, on the other hand, was sharp, intuitive, and unafraid of challenging the status quo. Together, the three of them could expose Victor's manipulative schemes and bring him down before he could cause any more damage. A growing bond, Audra's relationship with Nate. As the days passed, Audra found herself growing closer to Nate Hastings, a doctor with a strong sense of justice and a heart of gold. Their relationship, once tentative and professional, began to blossom into something deeper. Nate was a man who valued honesty and integrity, and he admired Audra's courage in exposing Victor's dark secrets. As they spent more time together, their bond grew stronger, and the connection between them was undeniable. Nate, recognizing the weight of what Audra had done, praised her for her bravery. "You did the right thing, Audra," he told her one evening, his voice filled with admiration. "It couldn't have been easy, but you're on the right side of this." Audra's heart swelled with gratitude, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly understood. She had never been the type to trust easily, but with Nate, she felt safe. Their relationship took on a new depth, and they began to lean on each other for support as they prepared for the storm that was about to hit. Victor's wrath, the fall of the mighty Newman. Meanwhile, Victor was not taking Audra's betrayal lightly. His fury was palpable as he realized that his carefully crafted plans were beginning to crumble. For the first time in years, he was losing control. Audra, who had once been his trusted ally, had turned on him, and now she was working against him, sharing everything she knew with the very people who sought to bring him down. Victor's anger burned hotter with every passing day, but what truly made the situation worse was the growing disdain he was receiving from those closest to him. His own children, once loyal and devoted, were beginning to see him for what he truly was, a cold, manipulative tyrant who cared only for his own power. The once admired patriarch of the Newman family had become a pariah, and no one was willing to stand by him anymore. Victoria, in particular, had reached her breaking point. The straw that broke the camel's back came when she witnessed her father's callousness towards her brother, Nicholas. For years, Victor had played favorites and manipulated his children against each other, but this time, Victoria couldn't take it anymore. In a public display of defiance, she turned on her father. "You've gone too far, Dad," she said in a voice that trembled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "You've hurt everyone you love, and you don't even see it. You're a monster." The words cut through Victor like a knife, and for a brief moment, he seemed genuinely stunned. He had always thought of his children as extensions of himself, pawns to be controlled. But the realization that Victoria, his own flesh and blood, had turned against him was a blow he had never anticipated. The heart attack. Victor's breaking point. The emotional toll of the confrontation with Victoria, coupled with the growing pressure from all sides, proved to be too much for Victor's aging heart. As he stood there, processing the venomous words from his daughter, his chest tightened, and a sharp pain shot through his left arm. He staggered back, his face contorting in agony, before collapsing onto the floor. "Victor!" shouted Nikki, who had arrived just in time to see her ex-husband's collapse. Panic filled her voice as she rushed to his side, her mind racing. "Somebody help him!" The room erupted into chaos, with family members scrambling to call for an ambulance. But it was clear that the damage had already been done. Victor's heart could not withstand the weight of years of guilt, betrayal, and rejection. As he was rushed to the hospital, his mind raced, not with thoughts of survival, but with the cold realization that his empire was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. In the sterile confines of the hospital, Victor lay unconscious, his future uncertain. The once feared titan of Genoa City was now at the mercy of his own body, surrounded by a family that had all but abandoned him. And as the minutes ticked by, the question remained, could the great Victor Newman survive the betrayal of those he had once called his own? Or was this the beginning of the end for the man who had ruled with an iron fist? A new dawn for Genoa City. While Victor lay in his hospital bed, the people he had wronged began to reclaim their lives. Kyle and Claire, armed with the secrets Audra had shared, began to build a strategy to take down the Newman Empire once and for all. Nate and Audra, united in their love and shared mission, set their sights on a future without the shadow of Victor looming over them. For the first time in years, there was hope in Genoa City. A hope that didn't come from the manipulative hands of Victor Newman, but from the people who had the strength to stand up to him. And as the city began to heal, the once great Victor Newman found himself facing the consequences of his actions, alone and vulnerable. The empire he had built was crumbling, and nothing, not even his manipulative genius, could save him now. This narrative fleshes out the key events, adding complexity to the characters' emotions and motivations while maintaining the core of the original story. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. Audra's decision to turn on Victor wasn't born of simple spite, it was a matter of survival. From the moment she agreed to partner with him, she stepped into a world of ruthless ambition where loyalty was fleeting and the price of failure was ruin. Audra saw firsthand how Victor used people as chess pieces. He lifted them up when they served his purpose, then discarded or betrayed them the moment they became inconvenient. As Victor's plan began to spin out of control, bared to the light by leaks, rumors, and growing opposition, Audra realized that if she remained by his side, she would be tied to his inevitable downfall. She weighed her options, stay with Victor and hope his plan succeeded, only to risk becoming the scapegoat when things went south, refuse him outright, but risk his wrath and an uncertain future in Genoa City, feign loyalty, then betray him at the critical moment, leveraging her insider knowledge to protect herself and earn the goodwill of others. Audra chose the third not out of malice, but out of cold pragmatism. By warning Kyle, Claire, and Nate, she built herself an insurance policy. If Victor triumphed, she still retained his initial favor. If he failed, she would be seen as the courageous whistleblower rather than his accomplice. Will Audra regret what she's done? On one level, yes, Audra will carry a measure of guilt. She had promised Victor her loyalty, and betrayal carries its own emotional toll. In quieter moments, she's haunted by the realization that she hurt people she barely knew, people like Claire, with whom she'd shared laughs, and Kyle, who'd trusted her instincts. Yet, Audra is no stranger to hard choices. She consoles herself with the knowledge that Victor's empire, from boardrooms to family dinners, was built on manipulation and fear. If exposing his schemes prevents him from causing more harm, then her conscience remains relatively clear. She may even come to see this gambit as a turning point in her own life, the moment she stopped being a pawn and claimed agency. Still, the sting of regret might surface when she sees Victor's weakened state in the hospital, lying pale and vulnerable, no longer the implacable titan she once feared. That image could trouble her, and Audra may question whether there was another path, one in which she simply declined to work with Victor from the outset. But that thought is quickly smothered by the memory of his mercilessness toward anyone who crossed him. Victor's fate, life or death? Victor Newman's collapse, his body giving out under the weight of stress, age, and betrayal, has landed him in emergency surgery after suffering an acute ischemic stroke. In men of his years, he's in his early 70s, the prognosis is always guarded. The immediate concerns are extent of the brain injury, how much brain tissue was deprived of blood flow, and whether clot-busting treatments were administered in time. Surgical complications, the risks of bleeding, infection, or swelling during and after the operation. Pre-existing conditions, Victor's long history of stress, possible hypertension or heart disease, and the cumulative toll of decades of high-pressure living. Given these factors, his doctors have placed him on life support, closely monitoring vital signs in the intensive care unit. Yesterday's surgery was deemed technically successful, organ perfusion was restored, and there were no immediate complications, but the next 48 to 72 hours are critical. Best case scenario, Victor regains consciousness, begins to rehabilitate speech and motor functions, and eventually recovers enough to return home, albeit in a diminished physical state, his empire now vulnerable to takeover. Worst case scenario, he suffers secondary complications, bleeding in the brain, pneumonia, or another cardiovascular event, and does not survive. At this point, nobody outside the ICU knows for sure. Nikki visits daily, her face etched with worry, praying that the man she once loved will pull through. Audra, on the other hand, watches from a distance, torn between relief that Victor's power to hurt people is, for now, stalled, and unease at what his absence might unleash in Genoa City's cutthroat power vacuum. What comes next? If Victor lives, he may emerge weaker. Physically, politically, and emotionally, forced to reckon with the betrayal of those he trusted and the fragility of his own mortality. His family, having seen him at death's door, may finally unite against him or fracture further as they jockey for control. If Victor dies, it will mark the end of an era. His empire will splinter, his rivals will seize the opportunity, and the city he dominated will feel a sudden, terrifying calm before a furious storm of power struggles. Either way, Audra's gamble has set these wheels in motion. She may never fully escape the shadow of her betrayal, but she's already secured a seat at the new table, one where Victor Newman's fate, alive or dead, will reshape everything in Genoa City.